So we have a fantastic session coming up, and I'm absolutely delighted that I'm going to be able to pass over to Chika Odua, who is the moderator for this session, who'll be helping us explore what do we do to make it a fairer, greener, a more gender-inclusive world in technical and vocational education and training. Chika, the floor is yours.
Great, thank you so much. All right, can the future of skills be both green and gender inclusive? We've got something to think about. That's a very loaded question. Hello, everyone. I'm Chika Odua, and I'm so pleased to be with you all here today. I'm calling in from Nigeria in West Africa for day one of this edition, the 14th edition of the European Development Days 2021. Everyone at this forum, this two-day forum, is talking about a Green Deal for a sustainable future. So it's a very important topic for us all to think about. So welcome to this session. We've got a lot of ground to cover in not a lot of time, but just to lay the ground rules. Remember, this is a very easygoing, casual chat, but even though it's going to be a casual chat, it's one that's going to be packed with very good, useful, substantial information. So to kick things off, I want to start with a question. And yes, I want you to answer this question. Let's see if we can get the question here up on the screen. We're actually using a tool called Slido. And so the question just came up here. So that question is, how many jobs can the green economy create by the year 2030? So the tool that we're using, it's very interactive. It's called Slido. So that's going to give you a chance to answer the questions, including this one. And we're also going to use this very same Slido tool to take in your questions for the speakers towards the end of this conversation. So go on ahead and give it a think. How many jobs do you think that the green economy can create by the year 2030? Give it your best shot. Some of you may have it offhand already, but some of you guys may not be very familiar, so just give it your best educated guess. You've got 5 minutes to answer this first poll question. We've got 3 polls that we're going to give to you, so I'm excited to hear what you guys have to say about the first one. Objective, I want to let you guys know that the objective for this session, we really want to do justice in talking about the necessity for bringing in more women into the technical skills training sector, you know, having women involved in this very important section, especially as we move forward, looking at a more green future, taking a more green approach to future skills training. We also want to talk about the importance of having the private and public sector come together and communicate, again, to support women inclusiveness in technical skills training. So it's a very bold mandate, but we're going to do it. And we've got about 40 minutes or so to do that. I want to first go over to our to the Director General of UNIDO, United Nations Industrial Development Organization, Mr. Lee Yong. He has a very important message to give to us, and let's just take a look at that.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I'm pleased to welcome you to this lab debate in commemoration of the European Development Day 2021. I thank the organizers for offering this space for dialogue to explore how we can deliver sustainable and inclusive skills development programs to achieve the goals of the decade of action. Research reveals that the global economy will lose up to 18% of its GDP to climate change if no action is taken. Further, up to $28 trillion will be added to the global GDP by closing the gender gap in the workforce. I call on our stakeholders to come together to co-create and offer demand-oriented, people-centric skill development programs to achieve inclusive and sustainable industrial development in support of our ambitious drive towards the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Let us take the opportunity from the current crisis to accelerate the provision of a greener and more inclusive technical education to build a skilled workforce and reduce the job skill global mismatch. We must work together to create greater and better inclusive employment opportunities within a thriving industrial landscape that includes the ecological and digital transitions. I look forward to hearing your views on how the future of skills can become greener and gender inclusive. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much for that excellent message. I noticed two things I just want to point out. He said that we could lose 18% of jobs and GDP to climate change if no care is taken. I also like the way he talked about the gender skills gap. He used the word job skills mismatch. I think that was a very key word. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that. So the job skills mismatch in terms of male to female participation, there is a gap, and we need to move forward in trying to fill that gap. All right, so I want to introduce everyone to three fascinating people who will be joining us in this conversation. We've got Mr. Cesare Onestini. He is the director of the European Training Foundation. Thank you so much for being with us. Then we've got Dr. Bernardo Calzadilla Sarmiento. He is the managing director of the Directorate of Digitalization, Technology, and Agribusiness at the UN Industrial Development Organization. And then last but not least, joining us from Zambia, we have Euphrasia Mulenga. She is an aircraft maintenance engineer, and she's the Africa representative for World Skills Champions Trust. Thank you all, ladies and gentlemen, so much for being here. So it's now time for us to reveal the answer to that first poll question. Let's see if we can bring it back up on the screen again. It was how many jobs could be created by the green sector by the year 2030. Let's see what the choices that we had there. Can we bring that up on the screen? How many jobs can be created by the year 2030? You've got 100 million, 24 million, 1.2 billion, and then the last one there is not quite sure. So that's the last response there. So the answer to that question is actually 24 million. 24 million. According to the International Labor Organization, new jobs will be created in the energy sector by, this is a big by, only by adopting sustainable practices. So things like using electric cars and trying to improve energy efficiency in homes and office spaces. So things like better air conditioners and refrigeration, things the like. So keep that number in mind, 24 million. So for my first question, I want to go to Cesare with that number that we have in mind, 24 million. And of course, as the head of the European Training Foundation, you all are working towards initiatives in green energy sectors, also in the area of education and training and skills. My question to you, Cesare, is what is the ETF trying to do to bring about that 24 million jobs? We're trying to actualize 24 million jobs by the year 2030. What is your organization trying to do to meet that potential? I think that your audio, can you check, make sure your mic is on? We're not hearing you very well. On the side, you've got three buttons there. There's a camera, then there's a microphone, the second icon. You've got that clicked. Ah, okay. Okay. Okay, well, let's try to get some, let's see if we can come back to you, if you can maybe try to figure out the audio issue. I just want to go then to Bernardo. Let's talk about the public and private collaboration. Of course, UNIDO, the organization that you're working with, is known to be an agency that has a very close alliance with the private sector. So do you think that the public and private partnership for green jobs can solve the gender gap in technical training? What can it actually do to meet that, what the Director General, Mr. Leon, called a jobs mismatch with males and female participation?
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for the question. Can you hear me well?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Yes, there is no doubt that the pandemic has brought us to a point of no return, especially in what concerns digital transformation. But we were already in a process of technological acceleration, and we already saw there that there was a skills gap. And we have seen that, and we have noted that many skills are changing. The job market is changing. We are in a turmoil, not only because of COVID, but because of this process of accelerated transformation, the challenge of climate change. And McKinsey showed that by 2020, 20% of the global workforce will be changing. They may be underskilled. 375 million workers may have to transfer in new roles. So we are really in a world of change. And among the most important demand skills, we find digital skills. Again, this point of no return. But what we see in the digital skills is that there is a skills gap that is affecting employers, employees, but also this skill gap is disproportionately punishing women. So less women has access to technology than men. You can see it in the access to very basic devices such as mobile phones. 200 million fewer women have access to this technology. And at UNIDO, we realized that we need to contextualize the impact of the fourth industrial revolution and the pressing requirements also to achieve a green economy for a livable future. We have interlinkages among and between digitalization, digital transformation, green industrial development. Green skills need to be aligned with competencies required by the smart manufacturing process. And to close the skill gap means also to close the gender gap, because it is anticipated that from a green angle, it is important that we also look at, it could mean more than 11 trillion added value to the global GDP by 2028. So we are in front of a huge changes, and we need to prepare for the challenges in the future. And there is no doubt, in UNIDO, we strongly believe in stakeholder collaboration. We have SDG 17, and we believe that this is important to realize that the solution-making process is within this public-private dialogue collaboration and bringing this forward. In terms of demand-oriented skills development, we have some proposal called public-private development partnership to identify the private sector skills demand. And this is the key issue, that we have to develop the skills according to the demand, and we have to engage with the public sector while evaluating the public technical education to increase the employability of young people, close the gender gap in this industrial sector, and ultimately we want to reduce poverty. Public-private partnerships can also be the path for greening the economy, because we can also at the same time do the gender gap. So we should be calling sustainability of the economy, because sustainability bears in mind already the gender equality concept. And what is important is also to put it in context of innovation and creative economic diversification. There is no doubt that societies that have gender equality can be more productive, be it at the enterprise level, community, society. Public-private collaboration can create shared understanding of value of natural resources, allowing also a better private sector participation and a more sustainable understanding where we should go. The public sector can facilitate also research and development to advance technological process and reduce the risk of private investment. So we need to have this virtual circle of collaboration in relation to public and private. It has proven that infrastructure projects have been extremely successful when we put public-private together, but they can also play a critical role when we are advancing green infrastructure. With this enabling an environment and required skills, we can move easier and have better return of investment. Let me finalize just by saying we need to transition towards green economies and aspire to improve livelihoods of all people and communities by creating green, decent jobs, but gender equality must be at the center of national agenda. And this is very important. We must make sure that gender equality is included in the policies, because we have to make sure green investment may bring the investment, but they do not necessarily mean access of green and decent job for women. So we must make sure that the policies take this opportunity so that women and young people have this effective access to green and decent job opportunities. And we have to work in adequate training, that we have to develop and provide and facilitate access to these green jobs to concentrate the economy, which has still a very limited access to female participation and representation. Thank you. Back to you.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Thank you so much. The big key I heard you mention there, what stuck out to me was poverty eradication, trying to make sure that we can meet that gender gap to reduce poverty. I think that was a very important point, Bernardo. Thank you so much for that. So I think we've got Cesare back. I think your audience back with us, right?
It is, I hope.
Okay, excellent. Just to remind the audience, we had a poll question. The very first poll question that we had was, how many jobs can be created with the green economy by the year 2030? I'm looking at the results here. Most of you all actually chose 100 million, but it's actually 24 million. So we're going to actually turn to Cesare for us to elaborate a bit further on this figure of 24 million jobs. That is a huge potential. So what is your organization trying to do to make sure we can actually, tap into this potential of 24 million jobs, the European Training Foundation?
Thank you so much, Chika, and sorry about the glitch. It is indeed important to understand the challenge that we have in front of us linked to the green economy. And Bernardo set out a lot of the elements. And one of the important aspects for taking policy measures is to understand that in order to meet this challenge, we need to see that his impact is existential for the quality of life, for the quality of work, and for the sustainability of our societies. And it is also important to understand that it has an uneven impact. It has a disproportionate impact on poorer groups, on disadvantaged groups, and also it has a disproportionate impact on women. And the gender dimension, therefore, as was said, is key for this. 24 million of jobs potential is important because it's also in the context of the number of jobs that might be lost in the transition. So we know that this green economy challenge will disrupt the way of work in many sectors. It will push for changes in the skills requirement, and therefore the answer, which is in the title of our session, it's about how can skills become green and gender inclusive. And really without these two elements, there is no appropriate response, because skills development is what will allow us to face up to the challenge. We need to see that environmental degradation is not gender neutral. It's because women are in different occupational sectors and they have a differential in their skills, access to skills. It's therefore important to bridge these gaps and ensure that the potential of women participation is realized in order to have gender responsive policies. We need to see that there are a number of things to be done. And you ask, what are we doing? Well, in the European Union, we work within the framework of the European Green Deal, which is really realizing that we need all of society responses to meet this challenge. And this European Green Deal, it's about the responses we have within Europe, but also, crucially, in the cooperation and support that we have as part of our external action. And that's where European Training Foundation works. We work in supporting countries outside of the European Union in realizing this full potential. And therefore, we look at these two elements of the green transition and gender inclusion as going very much hand in hand, because the risk is that the green transition might in fact make worse the gender segregation. And if we are not careful and put in place measures that accompany the transition, we will not realize either of our goals. We will not get to the green transitions, and we will leave even more women behind, because we need to have these two elements together. Very concretely, we need to look at the question of access to skills development, the question of the relevance of the skills that are learned. We did a number of studies recently with partners, including EBRD. We work with UNIDO. We start looking at sectors, and we see that in the different sectors, there is a strong need for new mixes of skills. And there is a potential to create new jobs, but this potential is limited if we do not have the right candidates, and if we're not trained in the right way. Also, there is a strong potential with new technologies coming, even in traditional sector. We looked, for example, at agri-tech, agriculture. New technologies coming in, there is a big potential for better jobs, but then we need to be upskilling the workers, and this upskilling needs to be gender inclusive, and this is the key, because we need to have this approach cutting across all our policies. We can give many examples, and I'll be happy to come back and provide some examples, but the important thing is to connect these different dimensions from the bottom up, realizing that if we do not produce gender inclusive skills development, then we will not meet our goals in terms of the green economy, green transition, and we might face even more dire consequences from the disruptions that will come thereof. Back to you.
Very interesting. Yeah. I just want to ask again, Cesare, if you can just give a bit specifics on, for example, the global north, the global south, countries at various stages of development. Do you find that they take different approaches to how they try to bring women into technical skills training when we talk about the global north and the global south?
I think it's a question that unfortunately cuts across all countries, and the differential is linked to the ways in which the access to the training system is built, what are the incentives, and what are the opportunities. But one of the things that we see as crucial is the level of information that is offered to families, to students, trainees, in order to make their choices. We have seen, we launched, I'll give you an example. We launched an award recently on the future of green skills, and we had an entry from Gaza, the Gaza Training Center, where they were focusing on photovoltaic systems, maintenance and installation of photovoltaic systems. And they had 100 graduates, females, coming in. And why were they coming in? Because they realized that with the high unemployment around them, this was an option that was giving them the possibility of employment and gain of employment. But the crucial element there was having the information, having the knowledge to make that choice, and then having the access and the incentive. So I think the examples that we see are spread around the countries. We also need to see, when you talk about global north, global south or so, that this disruption really goes through all the sectors, not just the high-tech sectors, but also the very traditional sectors, the ones where there is still a lot of employment possibilities. And there, though, the employment possibilities will only be realized if we combine the traditional skills, for example, in the tourist industry, together with new technology, new skills that can enhance the quality of the work, give more opportunities, and produce also better and more decent jobs.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And we have Euphrasia. Thank you so much. We have Euphrasia here with us, joining us from the Global South, and she is an aircraft engineer. Euphrasia, are you here with us? Not yet. We're going to try to see if we can bring Euphrasia back on screen. Okay, Euphrasia will join us shortly. Okay. But just, I want to see if we can go back to talking about what it's going to take for United Nations to support countries to close the gender gap and to really boost green growth. Bernard, if you can take that question, what do you think that the UN could do to really support countries to close the gender gap? Specific takes. I know that you mentioned you think that countries should have it in their national agendas. But of course, when we talk about things like budget, to try to improve these things and move these policies forward, what can the UN do to really bolster these agendas that nations can have in place to bolster female participation in tech skills training?
Thank you so much. Indeed, I think that we have to start at the policy level, and we need to set the agenda right, and we need to contribute for the countries to realize that we need to introduce this in the different policy making processes, be it industrial policy, be it environmental policy. We really need to see that this is included. Certainly, the more we move into the education and the skills, we will narrow down where we have to make this inclusion and what I would call the agenda setting. But then we also need to do it in many dimensions. UNIDO can do this also by promoting investment, impact investment. We have a number of dimensions, what type of sustainability investments we can do. And also we need to promote at the level of standards that include a gender equality concept behind, will help us to do this, be it social responsibility standards. So what I mean is that we need to start at the macro level and then get closer in the influencing to the enterprise level, where we could have a real impact, so that this process can become at the same time interconnected, and we can see that digital and green are together, but at the same time we cannot leave the gender dimension behind. So I think that we have a number of tools and elements where international organizations, the EU, we can contribute for these processes to be more inclusive. And this is the biggest concept. We need to make sure that development is inclusive. And in that context, we have a toolbox that we will help in order to achieve the SDGs. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. We've got Euphrasia back with us. Euphrasia, you are an aircraft engineer. I can't even imagine the kind of training that you had to go through to really make sure that you were under your belt with your profession. Is she with us, or is she gone again? Oh, we've lost Euphrasia again. She's coming from Zambia, so she's in a very unstable internet connection. But let me just now go to the second poll. We've got another question for our audience. Are we ready for question 2? Let's bring that up on the screen. Our second poll question is, which industry is more male dominated? We've got, is it engineering? Is it data and AI, construction, or cloud computing? Which industry is more male dominated? We're going to give you 5 minutes to have a think on that. But I want to find out, Shisari, just your general thoughts off of that, off of those 4 responses. What do you think it could be?
Male domination of the area. But I think the situation will vary very much according to countries here. Traditionally, I think each country will have a different attitude to this.
Interesting point. That's a good point. Country to country specific. That's very interesting. Euphrasia, what about you? What do you think would be, what are your thoughts toward that second poll question? Which industry is more male dominated? Engineering, data, AI, construction, cloud computing. Especially in your part of the world, which industry is more male dominated of those 4? Engineering, data and AI, construction, and cloud computing. I think we've lost her again.
More knowledge about the engineering sector, so I would say engineering sector.
Okay, excellent. And speaking of engineering, what kind of cultural barriers?
Because I have more knowledge about the engineering sector, and that's my field. So, yeah.
Sure. Excellent, excellent. But speaking about your field of, aerospace and engineering, can you talk about some of the cultural barriers that you had to overcome when trying to move forward in this profession? Also, where do you see the future of your industry, especially as we move more towards, a greener approach to doing things?
Thank you very much, Chika. So what I came to discover after enrolling into my career, I discovered that not many women are into engineering, or rather my field. Sometimes it is due to information in homes. People just tend to feel like there's feminine jobs and there's male jobs. But addressing the issue of gender diversity and future, I see aviation going. I feel gender diversity is one solution that we could use to bring gender diversity. Why I say so is that it's one thing to have all these amazing, to fill all these fields, but it's also another thing to find a woman who is passionate, who's going to enter a particular field, say it grow. So for me, I would say it is passion that was, speaking from experience and how I entered into my career. Parents and guardians have the first role in helping us achieve the diversity, because at a little age, they're supposed to be able to train to skills and help them find their passion. And the industry and the education system going forward will work together to provide all these opportunities and feel this is what is future. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much. But I just wanted to find out, what do you think is the future of your industry? Where do you think it could go? Especially, how can it incorporate more green technology moving forward? Euphrasia, did you hear me? That was for you. I was just trying to find out the future of
fuels. But not only that, a research shows that Airbus has announced to want to bring into the world by 2035 a zero-emission aircraft. Yes, I did.
We can hear you. You can continue.
The future of aviation is green, in the sense that currently we are having aircrafts that are using biofuels, which have a reduced effect. Not only that, but Airbus has announced by 2035, hopefully, to
got a slight lag with her, but we can still hear her. Yeah, I think she's coming in a little bit slow, but let's let her finish her thought. Okay, we've lost her. So she'll join us in a moment, but I just want to go back to the second poll question that we have. Can we bring that up? The question was about the industry that was more male dominated. Let's bring the second poll. So there we go. Which industry is more male dominated? We've got engineering, data and AI, construction, and cloud computing. And the answer is, well, let's see what you guys put. You guys, the highest one there was construction. Let's see if you guys got the right answer. Drum roll, ding, 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 ding. What is the right answer? So the answer, of course, is it's cloud computing. I thought that was what you guys put in. It's cloud computing. So in cloud computing, women make up 14% of the workforce. In engineering, it is 20%, and in data and AI, 32%. So we've got a long way to go, ladies and gentlemen. So at this point, I want to take the questions from the audience. Let's see what questions that you have for us. We've been talking about how to close the gender skills gap in technical skills training. We've been talking to three very fascinating people who've really brought a lot of information forward to us. And again, this is all about trying to create awareness on why we need to bring more women into the fold and the importance of the public and private sector coming together. So as far as taking some questions, let's see. Do we have any questions from the audience? Don't be shy, don't be shy. If you guys don't ask, I will definitely ask my own questions. I will definitely ask my own questions here. Well, I've got a question actually. So this can, whoever wants to answer this, any of our speakers, how can developing countries make an easy green transition? How can that be an easier transition? Sometimes when you're trying to bring in these new ideas, you're kind of rocking the boat a little bit, right? And sometimes society isn't quite ready for such changes. So how can countries really make this an easier transition so that their populace will be comfortable with it?
If I can add one word, and then maybe others will want to come in. I think the key component for the green transition, and it connects with the gender dimension, is that it has to be linked to a cultural shift, a cultural change, and understanding that it's in our common interest to do this. I think the most encouraging sign of this are indeed the movements often led by young people, often led by young women, in fact, that point in this direction and show us that the future has to be green, not because it's an ideal, not because it's an aspiration, but because it's a necessity. And we need to connect these to the realities of people. And I think in the areas that we are discussing, the area of skill, the important connection then is to make the link with what are the opportunities and the advantages for individuals making certain choices about the training for them. It's true for young people choosing their initial training, and it's also true for older workers who have to retrain because their industries might be shedding jobs or because they need to restructure. So it's important that the information is provided, and there public policy, active labor market policies, and these are the important elements, whether we are in the north or the south, but especially in the south, and especially in countries with a lot of young people. I think that's the energy that we need to harness as public policies in order to have a chance of transforming the way in which societies understands the impact and sees the benefits of supporting the change.
Mm-hmm. And let's talk about socio-economic sectors. Oftentimes, when we're talking about the green sector, it seems like only a certain section of the economy, the socio-economic strata, is really listening. So some of these messages may go over the heads of certain people, you know, if that makes sense. So how do we try to make sure that those who are living in, you know, hand-to-mouth positions, who are really at the bottom socioeconomically, how can they also understand the importance of the green sector? Because oftentimes there's this thinking that this type of work, this type of conversation is for the West, is for people in certain positions, where some people are just trying to meet their daily demands. You still have a huge chunk of the global population that's living on less than $5 a day, less than $2 a day. So how can we also bring those people into the conversation? And that's for anyone to answer.
May I start? And I wanted to add still to the very good answer on the culture. We need to respect values. And what is important is that traditional societies, like I come from Bolivia, from the Andean region, we have been for hundreds, thousands of years living in harmony with nature. And if we allow this respect for coming back to these original values, we will have a more easy transition and more easy, greener perspective for our future. And in that regard, to the second question in relation to the socio-economic sectors, definitely what we need is we need more holistic thinking. We need to think the development as a process of life and where everything becomes interconnected. And I said it before, the digital and the green, they are interconnected. Digitalization is not an end in itself. A digitalization can be a wonderful, powerful tool to bring the green agenda forward. And we had another very interesting element, which is poverty alleviation. We have to make clear to everybody that when we are fighting for mitigating climate change, when we are trying to help adaptation to climate change, it's about reducing poverty, and it's about protecting the most vulnerable parts of society, people, women, and youth people. Thank you.
Excellent. I like the fact that you brought up the culture, and you coming from Bolivia, I can completely understand. So can you just talk about what measures can countries that are deeply rooted in traditional cultures, what can they do again to fill that gap? But also you talked about going back to nature. Do you feel like this is an easy conversation to have? Because oftentimes in these back to nature conversations, people who are on the lower socioeconomic stratus, they're trying to attain, they're trying to attain a certain lifestyle, they're trying to attain certain technologies. So to say going back to nature, for some people that may seem like a regressive movement, a regressive change. If they're trying to attain a certain lifestyle, and now you're saying going back to nature, so how can people who are coming from more traditional societies respond to this new messaging? Because it's a very new message, right? We're talking about a very new message compared to what we've been saying in the last 100 years of the Industrial Revolution.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree that it is based on our tradition, look forward. And looking forward means, for example, the circular economy. And when we talk about circularity, I say, but our traditional societies are circular by definition. They are always seeing how they take one outcome and one output that will become the input of the next cycle. And they have been living around basic principles, which is respect to nature, rotation, the cycle of life. And this is what it's about when I say we need to root it in the traditional values. But certainly, we live now in a society where we are trying to adopt and use technology, but we need to do it in a way that we also keep in mind the traditional value and we put them together. And this is the beauty of it. With the traditional value and with technology and with forward thinking, we can bring society to the next level.
Mm-hmm. So Euphrasia and Cesare, I want to ask the two of you, because you mentioned that there are certain jobs that people feel are for women, certain jobs people feel are for men. That was Euphrasia's comment in her country. So what can be done to actually break that cultural barrier that this job is for women, this job is for men? So I'd like to hear from the both of you. Euphrasia, if you can still hear me, you can type in the chat. If you've got some comments, just type in the chat and we'll try to read that out to our viewers as well. Cesare, what do you think about that?
Thank you, Chika. I would say three things. One is role models. I think role models are essential because you need to show to especially young girls that there is an opportunity, a choice to be made, but also to their families. You need to show that that's a choice that is meaningful and valuable. Secondly, I think we need to share more information about how the jobs are changing, because the concept that people have maybe of what a job in agriculture is has really changed now. There are a lot of jobs in agriculture all over the world, especially if you look, for example, at water management, how you use water in agriculture. A lot of it includes technology. You need to be able to use certain tools that are nothing to do with what people think about agriculture, but that's the skill. And that's a skill which is equally accessible to a girl, to a boy, and it's important to focus on sharing this information. And thirdly, I think it's the way in which we support as public policy the access to skills and training. And that's where I think, as was said earlier, it's important to get the private sector involved as well, because it's also the private companies that set the tone and decide who they promote, how they show that they can have an impact. And those we have seen, and we have a lot of data about it, those who have equal participation of women at all levels of the company are doing very well. So I think that is also one of the key elements to move. So the role models, looking at the changes in all the traditional sectors as well, and getting the private sector on board.
Excellent. Euphrasia, did you have any role models that helped you to come to your decision to become an aircraft engineer? Any role models you can think about in your society or at large? And feel free to type in as well. If we can't hear you, just feel free to type. Let's see if she's going to type in a response. But yeah, to your point about role models, I think that's very important. You know, it's hard to find role models in certain societies where they continue to insist that certain jobs are for certain genders. Me coming from Nigeria, we have had women breaking through with certain roles. And, you know, seeing Euphrasia makes me so happy, because I can think of lots of women across the continent of Africa, across South America, who are really trying to break forward to have more jobs that women can see. And even so that little girls can say, hey, I can do this. I can do what she's doing. I can tinker with an instrument. I can tinker with a computer. But one thing I have to mention is education. We've been talking about education. Bernard, I know this is your sector, education. But the fact is that in many institutions, and whether that's from primary school or going up to tertiary, women are still being corralled towards a certain field and led away from other fields in education. So Bernard, how do you address this when even in societies and countries where women are told, oh no, you can't major in this, you can't major in that. So again, it starts from the education just from primary school and then going on to the tertiary school. So again, how can we ensure that women have more options on an educational front, even just in obtaining a degree and pursuing degrees?
I would still get it back to the market, and I would think that it depends on the business case. There is a business case in having women in an enterprise. In a time where innovation, creativity is so important, it is proven that having a balance will bring a different workspace, it will bring a different motivation, it will bring a different engagement. And we have to take it from that angle. We have to take it from the angle that it has to be based on the demand of the enterprises, based on the private sector, and the private sector has to send the signals to the public education system at all. So again, back to this balance between the public-private. We cannot just try to do it everything through policies. Policies can be extremely powerful, but we need this dialogue in order to bring this forward.
Excellent. So I want to go to our third poll question. This is our third and final poll for this session. Let's bring that up on the screen.
Shika?
Yes.
Can I just, hi, it's Tamsin. It's a fascinating conversation. I'm really enjoying it, but I need you to conclude in the next 60 seconds if you can.
That's noted. Excellent. Thank you so much for that. All right. Well, I just want to end it with the question that we had. It was, which country has achieved gender equality? And it was Iceland, Denmark, Sweden, or none. I just trying to see what you guys all think about that, but we don't have enough time. But the fact is, no country has yet achieved gender equality. We all know that gender equality is number 5 on the SDGs, but Iceland has been the front runner. It has been the front runner. So to round things up, I just want to thank our speakers, Bernardo, Cesare, and Euphrasia. Very insightful conversation. I learned so much. I think that for me, the most fascinating point was trying to see how we can bring in both the global South and the North to try to have the same balance of bringing women into the forefold, number one. Number two, trying to look at culture so that we don't antagonize traditional cultures, but we try to bring them in to say, welcome on board. We're all in this together. And the entire goal is to move towards a Green Deal for a sustainable future. Thank you all for joining this session. It has been a pleasure to be with you all here, and back to Tamsin in the studio.